Doctor Who, The Clock Man, by F. Thomas Blacklock. Performed by Alan Sunter. Inside the vortex that lies beyond space and time spun a police box that was not a police box. Behind its weathered and scuffed blue wooden doors was an enormous room with a vaulted ceiling, its dome-like walls honeycombed with amber hexagons. In the center of the room, on an elevated dais, was a multi-sided wooden desk, its varnished and lacquered surface encrusted with various instruments, huge gauges, polished brass switches and dials, which bleeped and whirred and hummed busily. At the heart of the desk, a short translucent column rose and fell rhythmically in time with the wheezing grind of the ship. A man stood watchfully over the console, periodically stooping to adjust controls with a discontented, thoughtful grimace. He looked young, but carried himself with an elderly air of dignity, in his flat cap, waistcoat, and old-fashioned frock coat. This, combined with the small spectacles he always wore, gave him the look of someone incredibly experienced and wise, betraying only a little of his true nature. For, like his craft, this traveler, known as the Doctor, was ancient and alien. Behind him, a boy lay on an Edwardian-style chaise longue, his mouth silently miming the words to the copy of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory he held in his lap. He wore ruffled, ill-fitting clothes, including threadbare white gloves and a top hat over his scraggly dark hair. The Doctor's companion, Chip, was a ragamuffin from the London of the 19th century, and since coming aboard had received something of an unorthodox education from the Doctor, not only learning to read and write, but also getting to see firsthand the history and future of his own planet. The Doctor smiled witheringly, wondering if that was how Chip saw him, as Willy Wonka, some wizardly inventor who had swept him away from his life of poverty and destitution and given him the keys to the whole chocolate factory. The thought amused him somewhat. Indeed, he had in time come to see both his charges somewhat as apprentices and himself as tutor. They were, after all, his responsibility. His mind turned briefly to the previous companion, the one he'd let down, the thought passing over him like a shadow. As if on cue, the door that led into the interior of the ship opened, and the Doctor's other companion emerged. Tamara was Chip's opposite in a lot of ways, a fiery, independent young girl from 21st century Earth, with auburn hair and piercing blue eyes. Right now, she was dressed punkish in ripped-up black jeans, high black leather boots, and a t-shirt printed with, "Saved the world and all I got was this lousy t-shirt." No doubt found in the bowels of the TARDIS wardrobe, the Doctor thought. Tamara was a girl after his own heart. Rebellious, certainly, reckless for sure, but unshakably strong. Yet the Doctor felt an odd sense of fatherly protectiveness for her. Perhaps she reminded him of his granddaughter. "So, where are we going next?" Tamara asked as soon as she walked in. And then, without waiting for the Doctor to answer, she said, "Can we do ancient Rome? I've always wanted to see ancient Rome." The Doctor stifled a laugh. "You can't go to ancient Rome dressed like that. They'd have a field day." Tamara grinned. "They can try and stop me." Before the Doctor could reply, a sudden, insistent bleeping came from the TARDIS console, accompanied by an urgent flashing red light. A sudden frown creased the Doctor's features, and he walked briskly over to the console, Tamara following suit, peering over his shoulder as he checked the TARDIS instruments. Chip didn't get up, instead peering half curiously, half warily over the top of his book. "What is it?" Tamara asked. "I'm not sure," the Doctor admitted thoughtfully. "The TARDIS has flagged up some kind of disturbance in time." He turned to his companions, something of a mischievous gleam in his eye. "Shall we go and investigate, children?" he said theatrically. Chip sighed, already knowing where this was going, and patiently placed his bookmark and set the book down before getting to his feet. "All right," he said dryly. but it better not take too long. Augustus Gloop's just fallen into the chocolate river. Tamara just laughed as the doctor began setting controls. The TARDIS materialized. Chip was first out the door and surveyed the scene with his usual mix of caution and curiosity. It was a hallway, paneled with varnished wood, the hardwood floor polished to a gleam, and the walls were covered in clocks. Small clocks, big clocks, some decorated with wood and others with brass. Clocks covered every inch of the wall, almost without interruption, ticking together in a cacophonous chatter. Blimey, who has this much trouble keeping time? Chip mused, shaking his head, as the doctor, then Tamara, emerged from the TARDIS behind him. The doctor closed the door behind him, then regarded the wall of clocks, frowning. Yes, I see what you mean, Chip. Very odd indeed, keeping so many clocks. Bit ironic, isn't it? Tamara said, looking at the clocks. You pick up a disturbance in time in a house full of clocks. She grinned at him, expecting him to laugh at her joke, but instead, the doctor's eyes became far away, dreamy. Yes, he muttered vaguely with a slow nod. Then, seeming to return to himself, he said, Let's see if we can't find who lives here, eh? See what they know. Tamara eyed him pointedly. If you say split up to cover more ground, I will kick you in the shins. I second that, Chip added. The doctor grimaced. All right, point taken. We stay together. The doctor had quickly worked out they were in a large countryside mansion surrounded on all sides by forests, probably somewhere in Germany. They found the girl in the library. It was nothing compared to the TARDIS's vast multi-story library, more of a quaint room filled with a few antique bookcases, stuffed with a handful of leather-bound volumes and yellow dog-eared paperbacks. Who are you? What are you doing here? The girl exclaimed, jumping out of one of the leather reading chairs as she saw them approach. Her voice had a German accent, and Tamara had to remind herself, not for the first time, that the girl was probably speaking German, but thanks to the translative magic of the TARDIS, they were only hearing English. Oh, hello there, the doctor greeted, softly and diplomatically, in a tone he'd used 100 times. I'm the doctor, and these are my friends Chip and Tamara. What's your name? Gretel, the girl replied, regarding them skeptically. She was younger than Tamara, maybe only about 12 or 13, her chestnut hair still tied in pigtails, but Tamara had to hand it to her. The kid wasn't just going to accept this. What are you doing here? She demanded. Oh, the doctor looked a bit flustered. Well, this may sound a bit odd and, well, facetious considering, but has anything odd been going on with time? Are you here about the Urman? Gretel asked, voice going quiet, color draining from her face. The doctor's eyes narrowed intently. Gretel, tell us. It may be important. What exactly is the Urman? Over the next several minutes, Gretel explained, through tears and with much gentle coaxing from the doctor, that her father, Klaus, a reclusive clockmaker, hence all the clocks, Chip thought, had been locking himself up in his workshop for longer and longer periods of time, not even coming out to eat during mealtimes. And when she did see him, he was moody, distant, and even snapped at her when she asked him why he was spending all his time working. Klaus, she insisted, had only ever been warm and patient. One night, Gretel was saying as the trio listened, after I was supposed to be in bed, I see the light under Father's study door. I went to the door and I listened. I could hear him muttering to himself, must finish before the Urman comes. The Urman is coming. He sounded scared, like... She broke off, choking with tears. Like what, my dear? The doctor asked, his voice ever so delicate. Like he was running out of time, Gretel said with a sob. At the doctor's request, Gretel had showed them to where her father's study was, a locked door at the end of the hall. She would only go as far as the door, not daring to venture inside, either to avoid incurring her father's newfound wrath, or to avoid whatever it was that terrified him. The doctor told her, gently but sternly, to wait in her room and not to come out until they came for her, no matter what she heard. She gave a silent nod and left them to it. Urman means clock man, the doctor told Chip and Tamara as he pressed his sonic screwdriver to the lock and it whirred busily. But the ship isn't translating, which means Urman as all one word, Urman as a proper noun, a name or title. Clockman, Tamara echoed, testing the words. Sounds like a story, like a Grimm's fairy tale or something. She shrugged. The doctor looked at her sharply, just as the lock clicked and the door edged open with a creak. On the other side of the door, they heard what sounded like heavy, ragged, and labored breathing. They edged through the door, the doctor holding his screwdriver experimentally out in front of him, panning it around as he scanned. The study was a tiny, boxy room with a single plush but faded red leather armchair and a big oak desk covered with blueprints, clock components, and a large desk lamp. The ragged breathing came from a figure, slumped in a heap in the chair, looking more like a rag doll. It was a man, and he was old. Impossibly old. His skin was withered and leathery, his face gaunt, with a long white beard trailing down his body. His eyes were fluttering, as if keeping them open was a struggle. He groaned painfully. "That's Gretel's father?" Chip said, looking pitifully at the old man. "I didn't think he'd be so old." "I don't think he is," the doctor muttered as he swept the screwdriver up and down the length of Klaus's body. "I think he's been artificially aged somehow, soaked with a massive dose of temporal radiation, like being hit with 70 years of life all at once." "What could do that to someone?" Tamara asked. "Oh, man," Klaus managed to croak, his voice like sandpaper. "I called him. My fault." "Of course." The doctor slapped his forehead with the heel of his hand. "Urman, the clock man. It's a folk tale. An obscure one, so I didn't make the connection right away. Think of it as a precursor to Bloody Mary or the Candy Man. You wind a clock back all the way at midnight, I think it goes, and if you're willing to make a deal, the clock man appears. That's what he is, see? A Faustian dealer. He gives you more time, more life, more time with a loved one, longer Sunday afternoons, that sort of thing. But in return, he gives you a challenge, a game, and if you fail, he takes your time instead." "Wait," Tamara's eyes widened. "That stuff's real?" "Not ordinarily," the doctor admitted. "But there was some kind of glitch in time, like a record skip, and some entity must have been able to use the summoning ritual of the clock man as a focus to enter our universe. But in doing so, effectively became bound by the laws of the story, when Klaus essentially imagined it into existence." "I think I get it," Chip put in. "This thing had to pretend to be this clock man to get into our world, but it worked too well, and now it's convinced it is the clock man." Chip looked to the doctor for confirmation. The doctor regarded his companion fondly. "Very good, Chip." The doctor crouched down, looking directly into Klaus's face. They could see he was struggling to stay awake, fading fast. "Klaus, listen now, you have to tell me," the doctor said firmly. "What was the game? What challenge did you agree on?" "Finish the clock," Klaus wheezed, his voice a breathy whisper. "Before midnight tonight, he would reverse time, reunite me with my Heidi." "Gretel's mother?" Tamara asked. "I suspect so," said the doctor solemnly. Tamara looked at the half-assembled bundle of clock parts on the desk. "Is this it?" She frowned at it quizzically. "I can't tell if it's a clock, a puzzle box, or..." "It's a trap," the doctor finished for her. "You see, in the fairy tale, a good wizard defeated the clock by trapping him in a special clockwork box between the tick and the tock, forever and ever." "Doctor," Chip said, suddenly concerned, "what happens if the box isn't done by midnight?" The doctor's expression darkened. "I imagine all the power of Klaus's stolen years will flow into him, and the clockman will be able to fully corporealize, free to wreak havoc upon this world, stealing time from more unsuspecting victims." "Then we have to finish it before that happens," Tamara exclaimed. "My thoughts exactly," the doctor muttered. The hours came and went, and the sky became dark. Tamara went and made sure Gretel got to bed, assuring her that everything would be right by morning. She hoped she was right, and the three got to work. Luckily, the doctor was pretty mechanically handy and pored over Klaus's reams of handwritten notes and blueprints. Neither Chip nor Tamara imagined something made only of clockwork could be so complicated. Occasionally, they would each pass the doctor a piece. He would inspect it and either place it or ask for a slightly different piece. It needed to be exactly right. "This will synchronize with all the other clocks in the house," the doctor said, cradling the finished product in his hands, a tiny metal box about the size of his fist. "When midnight comes and the time energy is released, this will spring open and act as a closed time circuit, trapping the energy and drawing the clockman inside." "Klaus designed that?" Tamara said, only following the basics of the technobabble. "Klaus is a genius in his field," the doctor shook his head, "but more likely the clockman was so overconfident it gave him the design knowing its complexity would be too much for an ordinary human mind." Chip scowled. "It cheated! But it didn't count on us showing up, eh, Doctor?" The doctor managed a withering smile. "Quite, Chip." Yet more hours passed, until Chip and Tamara were sitting slumped against the wall and leaning on each other, fast asleep. The doctor stood alert, watching the clock. Gently, he went over and roused his companions. "It's 11:58, he whispered softly. "I'm going out there." He held up a key on a length of cord. If he faltered. "If I lose, you must take this and lock yourselves in the TARDIS. Emergency Program 1 will activate and take you to your own times." Tamara stared at him, shocked. "Doctor," she says, "if that happens, we won't just leave you." "You don't have a choice," the doctor told her firmly. "If that thing got inside the TARDIS, it'd be able to drain enough power to make itself practically a god." Tamara looked sour, but nodded. "Doctor?" Chip looked at him, eyes wide. "Good luck, sir." The doctor stepped out into the dark and echoing hallway. 11:59, he thought. His grip tightened on the box in his hand. He listened to the chatter of the clocks around him. His Time Lord senses could feel it, the silent buildup of temporal energy buzzing in the air. He closed his eyes, inhaled deeply, and recited the names of all his past companions to himself as he wound his fob watch all the way around without looking. Midnight struck. Only a single clock chimed 12, the one in the living room. Just as well, the doctor thought, driving it home, realized that he was slipped through his. Slowly, deliberately, he opened his eyes. "I call upon the entity known as Urman," he spoke to the empty air. "I have completed your challenge. The humans in this house are under my protection." His voice was clear and commanding. "As President-elect of the High Council of Time Lords, I command you, appear before me." The clockman appeared with a flicker and a buzz like static. It looked like a skeleton made out of clockwork, but crooked and composed of odd, jutting, sharp angles. Its face was a grinning mask of metal teeth like knives, and its fingers ended with long, bladed claws. It seemed to flicker in and out of existence, a grey haze hanging around it like mist, half in the universe and half not.
I know you.
The clockman looked at the doctor with glowing eyes like gas lamps. Its voice was creaky and metallic, but its tone was gleeful, clownish.
All the creatures of midnight know you. You have many names. Loki, Sandman, Oncoming Storm, Destroyer of Worlds, Timeless Child.
The clockman paused before adding, with great relish,
Time Walker.
The doctor's blood ran icy cold, only for a second. Surely, the creature had only mistaken the doctor for the mythical hero of his own people. Its mind was already a mix of reality and folklore. It was probably just confused. "Whatever you call me," the doctor said, "I win." He held out the box in his hands. Nothing. Oh no, had he been mistaken? Miscalculated? The clockman laughed mockingly and spread out its knife-like fingers. Energy like lightning blasted and wrapped around the doctor, coursing into him. He felt his body, this body, aging rapidly. But worse than that, he saw his timeline unravel like a spool of tape, his future burning away. The edges of the box began to glow with silvery blue light, and the box sprang open. Golden light spilled from inside, and the clockman began to warp as it was pulled in like water running into a drain. The doctor felt the charge of temporal energy sucked from the air like cabin pressure, and he realized he himself was also being pulled in. Of course, traveling through the vortex as much as he did, he was drenched in time energy, and it was being pulled in like filings to a magnet, dragging him with it. The doctor screamed as he felt himself begin to twist and warp, his whole timeline being sucked into the box. Suddenly, he felt a hand tug on the back of his jacket. It was Chip, holding onto him for dear life, and behind him, Tamara, holding onto Chip with one hand and clinging to the door frame with the other. The doctor was yanked backwards, and the box fell from his hand, folding up origami-like as it fell. The doctor caught it and closed it with a satisfying click. The three of them lay on the floor, panting heavily for a minute. "Told you we wouldn't leave you," Tamara said breathlessly. "Yes, all right," the doctor sighed grumpily. "Point taken." The sun rose the next morning. The big mansion gave way to an eerie, still calm. The doctor, Tamara, and Chip had watched as the time stolen by the clockman flowed back into Klaus, and he aged in reverse. The wrinkles falling away, the beard retracting back into his face, the color fading back into his hair. He was now a youthfully handsome man, a little over 30 perhaps. "We should go," the doctor whispered. "He's going to have quite the hangover from all that aging and de-aging. Best let him and Gretel think this was all a dream." And the three of them slipped away, back to the TARDIS. "Between the tick and the tock, forever and ever," the doctor quoted as he tossed the clockwork box out the police box doors and watched it tumble away and disappear into the vortex. "And it won't ever get out again?" Tamara said, arching an eyebrow. "It might," the doctor admitted, "but it'd take eons to find its way back anyway. For now, I'd say problem solved." Chip was reclining in his chair again, sleepily and non-committally skimming through his book. Tamara yawned. "Well, I'm going to bed. I was up way too late. Good night." and with that, she disappeared into the TARDIS corridors. Good night, the doctor chuckled as he heard the door close. Suppose I should turn in for the night too, Doc, Chip said tiredly as he placed his book aside for the morning. Good night, Chip, said the doctor, and watched his companion go. Alone, in the silence of the console room, the doctor thought about what the clockman had said, about his many names, about midnight yet again, and shrugged. Probably just a coincidence, he decided. The doctor hummed pure imagination to himself as he set a course for somewhere new. The end. That was Doctor Who, The Clockman by F. Thomas Blacklock, performed by Alan Sunter.